Unstoppable by design. We talking health and talking fitness, talking life and talking nutrition. Way more than looks and aesthetics. Gotta tune in and don't miss it. Hey, go, go, gotta go harder, taking it higher, bringing that info here to inspire, chugging out fitness, bringing that fire. Hey, go, go, go.
Let's go. Welcome to Unstoppable by Design, where we talk all things fitness, mindset, and what it means to truly be unstoppable inside and outside the gym. I'm Matt Terry, and today we're exploring how barbell can be powerful in the fight against addiction. My guest is Corey Gately, a veteran clinician who spent 25 years on the front lines of substance use recovery and holds a CrossFit L2 credential. She's weaving two worlds together, therapy and training, to help people trade cravings for PRs and isolation for community. If you or someone you love is navigating recovery, this conversation could be the game changer. Grab your headphones and let's dive in. So Corey, how are you?
I'm great, thank you.
Awesome. So diving in, first question, 25 years in substance use counseling. What first drew you to add a barbell to your toolkit?
Well, I think we've always known that exercise is useful for someone who's navigating recovery, but we've not had great ways of managing that for people. And so my personal journey in coming here and then drawing a lot of connections between what we ask of people in recovery and what we do here started there with my own journey.
That's awesome. And you just celebrated 10 years with us.
I did,
right?
Yes.
Let's go. Was there a turning point client who showed you exercise could be a legitimate recovery intervention?
You know, it's funny. I have several people that I keep in mind and think about when I think about what exercise and recovery can be like. But I think one of the things that sometimes happens is people will come into our gym specifically, right? And then sometimes we'll then read our profiles on the website. And I have people who will come up to me after that and say, oh, hey, I saw that you're a substance use clinician and I wanted to tell you I'm in recovery. And that's really cool that people feel like they can confide and then let me know that. I think that happens a lot in Bootcamp. We have people who are sort of dipping their toe in exercise and coming into Bootcamp, and then they'll sometimes tell us as well that they're managing recovery. And we as a gym have made a lot of connections with bringing people in specifically in recovery. So, but yes, I do have a few people that I very much keep in mind that I know that this process has helped a lot.
That's so great. How does chronic drug or alcohol use blunt feel-good neurotransmitters?
So this is really the neurobiology of addiction, right? And we can make it sound really complicated, but we can also make it sound really simple. So drugs and alcohol are like having two keys that fit the same lock when it comes to our brain receptor sites, right? So you have receptor sites where feel-good chemicals sit, right? Like dopamine or norepinephrine. Putting a drug in kind of mimics that same thing that those chemicals can do. And so what it does is the drug or alcohol goes in and basically says to your feel-good chemicals, not only can I do this job, I can actually do it better. I can do it longer. I can make you feel good for a long time. It's very deceptive. When we say that drugs and alcohol hijack someone's brain, that's really what happens, is the brain gets hijacked by those chemicals. And so our feel-good chemicals eventually sort of sit back and go, well, I guess I'm not as good as the drug and I'm not as needed here. And they eventually start to deplete.
Gotcha. So I guess explain at a high level how exercise flips that chemistry back in a healthier direction.
It's such an exciting question. I love talking about how we can create new neuronal connections, right? That our brain can recover from things like that. And even if someone has a depleted amount of something like dopamine, exercise can help to wake it back up, right? And get it moving again. And so we can create new connections for dealing with anxiety, for dealing with depression. There's a lot of evidence out there that 30 minutes of exercise 3 to 5 days a week can help battle depression.
Awesome.
Almost as well, if not better, than the medications we have on the market today.
That's so great.
It's super exciting.
When someone freshly sober thinks about walking into Juggernaut, What's your initial conversation sound like?
I really like to focus on the benefits for them for wherever they're at, right? So someone might come in very early recovery, and we like to talk about how that might make their body feel better, how they might manage early recovery better. But generally, we would talk about the fact that we can increase feel good chemicals. There's so many benefits to getting your body moving. But also, I would focus on the community connection, especially in a gym like ours. People need connection in recovery, and they're going to get that here. They're not just going to be exercising alone. And I think I also focus a lot on how empowering it can be to realize what your body's capable of. So, a lot of confidence building.
That's awesome. Are there any red flags that tell you a client isn't ready for high intensity yet?
So, I would say no. I think this question is really interesting. It's so much like what we do in our gym in general, where we say that we can accommodate really anyone. We can have anyone be part of our classes. Our coaches are going to make sure that the programming and the movements work for each individual person, even though it's written one way. And so I think even though we may have some things that we might need to pay attention to, that's very similar to what we do with every other client we bring into the gym.
That's awesome. Why is a gym community so potent for filling the void that many feel in early sobriety?
You know, there are a lot of people who say that connection is the opposite of addiction. And what happens for a lot of people when they're actively using over time, months or years, is they get very disconnected from people. And so connection is super important. And over time in history, we've done that for people by sitting them in meetings. And that's wonderful, right? Meetings are great. Treatment is great. Therapy is great. All of those things are really, really good for people. But I do think we've had this missing piece where we haven't shown people that they can move their body and make that connection in a place like our gym. And so I think that it's super important that we start to focus on that as a piece of someone's recovery journey and helping them understand how much that can benefit the other pieces of what they're doing.
Yeah, I love that. The connected versus disconnected. How do you leverage peer coaching or buddy systems to keep clients on track?
This is such a timely question because we've spent a lot of time in the history of substance use really focusing on the clinical aspect, right? And focusing on making sure people see a therapist and get into clinical therapy. And we have this whole new generation that we're working on now where we say part of the importance of the beginning of recovery is connecting to peers. And so in programs that we have now, most often the very first person someone's going to connect with is a peer. If they land in our emergency room, they're going to see a peer first. And we have to move a little bit away from the clinical side of things. Folks aren't often ready for that yet. And so connecting people with other folks that have been there it's critical. And so what we've done here is we've done the same thing. We're connecting peers that are in recovery and doing things like Bootcamp with someone who's new and coming into a place like Bootcamp so that they have some comfort level, but they also have someone who understands, someone who's been there.
It's awesome. And you mentioned boot camp. Next question. Do you favor boot camp style classes or strength cycles for recovery athletes, or maybe a mix?
Yes.
Yeah. Yes.
Yes, all of the above. I think that really depends on the person. I think it depends on where they're at in their recovery journey. And I think what we've been finding lately, because we do a fair amount of supporting people in recovery in our classes already, I think what we've been finding is that for someone early in recovery, boot camp can be a really great option, or for someone who's newer to exercise. And we've also seen people come in and do well in our regular classes and in other programming. So I do think it depends on the person, but I would emphasize that the connection in our classes is important. Because again, we want to come back to that being the opposite of addiction, right? It's connection. And I think that being in group classes with people partnering up helps people to gain confidence. And that's really our goal.
Love that. Yeah, the community and connection. What depression or anxiety improvements have you observed after 30 days of consistent training?
Yeah, this is it. I think it's hard for the person to see. Sometimes we describe it like this. If you drive by a building every single day that's being remodeled, you probably don't see the big changes that are happening. But if you drive by once a week, you look at the building and go, oh, wow, it's completely different from a week ago. And so for the person who's making the changes, it's really hard for them to see those changes. And that's why feedback is so important for someone, that we provide feedback about the things we're seeing that are different. But in 30 days, we see people managing anxiety much better for sure. We can see a dip in depression, no doubt. And generally overall, I think that confidence in like moving their body in a month's time is very obvious.
That's awesome. Yeah, we see that a lot with athletes. They could be chipping away for a while and they don't see the changes in their body. And then we schedule goal reviews every 90 days. They come in and we're like, actually, you've made this amount of progress. And people are like, oh my God, thank you so much for showing me.
Right.
That's
It's hard to see.
yeah. Any breathing or mindfulness tactics you pair with workouts to blunt cravings?
I think these are all the same things that I would ask clients to do when I'm clinically working with them. We talk, and I know Anna talked about this in one of the other episodes about box breathing
Yeah.
and really being mindful of your breathing. I sometimes use even simpler tactics like tracing your fingers on your hand. We give this to kids a lot, right? But when you trace up your pinky, you breathe in, and when you trace down, you breathe out. So you're just using your own hand to breathe in and out.
Yep.
I also do a lot with tapping and teaching people how to tap on their cheekbones, tap on their forehead, maybe tap on their chest. That helps to reduce anxiety. And I think overall, we're just working on getting people through a moment of anxiety, right? To then get into exercise.
Yeah, like I heard you talk about the tapping just the other day. I think that's great. Like I
Yeah.
might use that. For clients on medication assisted treatment, are there exercise contraindications coaches should know?
Generally, for someone on medication assisted treatment, there are not a lot of things that we would need to know. It does depend on which medication someone's on, and it may depend on the person specifically what health problems they have. But generally, no. I will always take the opportunity, though, to explain what medication assisted treatment is and to try to reduce the stigma around that. And so, what medications for recovery do is they very often sit on the same receptor sites in the brain where an addictive substance had gone before, right? And so not only can it help someone to decrease their craving for use, but it can also help them to really get jump started in the beginning of recovery. And the way that I try to reduce stigma when I talk to people about medications for substance use disorder is this. We as a society do a lot to make sure that we stabilize people with medications, right? If you or I were newly diagnosed with diabetes and it was completely out of control, we would stabilize that with medications. My favorite analogy is this one: when someone goes to the doctor and they're struggling with something like heart disease, right? Maybe they have high blood pressure. It's a great example, right? It happens to a lot of people. We do several things. We tell that person that we're going to prescribe a medication. And then we also say, hey, there's these other things that you can do, like exercise and eating well. And very often in our society, that person will come back a month later and will have done one thing. They will have taken the medication. Their blood pressure is lower, and we applaud that. And then we can say, hey, are you feeling better? And can we start working on some of these other things? And with addiction, we generally have this idea in our society that people should just figure it out, just get well, right? Get up tomorrow and just do it different. Medications can be super useful in helping someone get jump started. It can be incredibly useful in the therapeutic process of getting connected to things like therapy and exercise, because we get them feeling a little better to begin with. And then we can work on coming off them down the road.
That's great. How can coaches respectfully discuss meds without crossing clinical lines, or should they even discuss?
It may not be something that they need to discuss, but my pat answer to that would be to be compassionate and caring, which is what we do with really every other thing that we ask our clients about here. So I don't think that's really any different when it comes to this.
Yeah, showing empathy. Top daily habits outside the gym that reinforce sobriety.
This is such a hard thing to say, just one thing. So I'm probably going to say two.
That's fine.
I think it would be like a tie for first, and it probably is the same answer that we would give with so many other things, but nutrition and sleep. There's so much that someone in early recovery might need to relearn or even learn for the first time, right? If you consider sort of an extreme example of someone that grew up in a household where there was substance use, they may not have ever been taught how to sleep well or what good nutrition looks like or how to move their body. And so we may be teaching them some of these things really for the first time in their life. And understanding the importance of sleep and how healthy nutrition can help the body recover is really, really important.
That's awesome. And talking about nutrition basics you emphasize to stabilize mood and energy in recovery.
So I would say over the years of counseling people, one of the things that I would focus on the most early on is what using sugar can do. And so if you think about drugs that are stimulants, right, which are a lot of what we're seeing people use today, we are a stimulant focused society in a lot of ways. But what happens is when you put a stimulant in, or even alcohol, right, because alcohol is sugar based, the pancreas learns to overreact. And so when you put sugar in, say somebody's drinking and they put alcohol in, the pancreas learns to completely freak out. It overreacts. It pours insulin into the bloodstream. And what that does is it drops somebody's blood sugar low. And when your blood sugar's low, you have cravings. And so that's why someone who's actively drinking, when their blood sugar drops low, they crave more alcohol, right? And so then in recovery, we see the same thing with both stimulant drugs and alcohol, is that someone will eat something like ice cream, right? Because they're craving sugar. That piece is missing for them now. And what the pancreas does is for a long time, it continues to completely overreact, pours insulin into the bloodstream, drops their blood sugar low, and now they're having another craving, potentially for use, right? Because cravings are always going to come back to the thing that they crave the most, which for a long time is going to be the substance that they used. So it's a lot about balance and making sure that we're balancing sugar intake and not spiking that insulin up high.
Yeah, interesting. Never thought of it that way.
Yeah.
I didn't know. That's cool. All right, rapid fire myth busting time. Myth number 1. Recovering individuals shouldn't elevate heart rate. It feels too close to anxiety.
Yeah, that's a myth. We should really be making sure people are learning how to do that. In fact, raising your heart rate in a place like the gym can actually train your brain to better deal with anxiety outside the gym. So when you use that in the gym, your amygdala, which is like I always call it your freaked out teenage girl. Your amygdala doesn't recognize the rational part of your brain, right? It doesn't know that there's a place that we can rationalize. The only way, and this is like anxiety explained in a very short piece, right? Your amygdala will freak out about something, and the only way it can tell you that it's freaked out is to send messages to your body, which is why we do things like sweat, our heart rate goes up, we start feeling like we can't breathe. That's your amygdala saying, I'm freaked out about something. And ironically, our amygdala can't communicate with our frontal lobe, which is where we rationalize. And so that's why I always tell people when they're having anxiety, like we need to rationalize, right? So your amygdala might be saying, there's a fire. But we have to communicate to the front part of the brain and rationalize that we're at a campfire. It's okay.
Yeah.
Right. And so That's a long answer to the question, but one of the things that you can do in the gym is to better train your amygdala and the frontal lobe of your brain to understand what anxiety is. So you raise your heart rate up, we can bring it back down. So we're really training our bodies to better handle anxiety everywhere.
That's great. Myth number 2, exercise just replaces one addiction with another.
Yeah, I really love that you're asking this question because that comes up a lot. People will say that a lot. Over the course of my career, I've really only seen exercise addiction a couple of times. Is it a real thing? For sure. Yeah, and I think that that's something we would need to always be aware of, but it's not something we see very often. And for the large majority of the folks that we see who come into recovery, we're talking about exercise as being a really healthy part of what they're doing in recovery. So I would say no, that we're not replacing one addiction with another.
Myth number 3, you need to be sober a full year before lifting heavy.
Oh, absolutely not. Let's get in there and start lifting. Specifically lifting weights too, right? We talk a lot about cardio, and I think it's really great that people in recovery find things like walk with a friend. Maybe they're finding that cardio works really well for them. But I think one of the things that you and I and all of our coaches here have witnessed with some of our folks in recovery is when they start lifting, they start saying, I had no idea my body was capable of this, right?
Yep.
It's very, very empowering to see someone lift. And I also think that for a lot of our, and I'll stereotype a little here, but for a lot of our folks who've sort of lived life on the edge in addiction, and specifically for a lot of the guys that we've seen come in, right? It's cool to see them come into an environment where the music's bumping, right? The weights are hitting the floor. And I think for a lot of people, it's different for them. And it's also a little bit like on edge, right? So if you've lived your life on the edge in addiction, it's kind of cool to come here and push some limits, right?
That's awesome.
And so this is a place that you can do that. You can push some limits and lift some weight, and we do it safely. So
Exactly, yeah. You've got a coach to help you. Beyond days sober, what metrics tell you a fitness-based approach is working?
I think there's so many things that we see from folks, including a reduction in their depression symptoms, a reduction in their anxiety symptoms, an increase in their connection to people. We have some very recent examples that I'm thinking of folks that are doing really well in their recovery and finding that exercise was a piece that they didn't even anticipate would be part of their recovery. And now it's a very crucial piece of their recovery.
That's great. Any wearable data you like, HRV, sleep metrics, for relapse risk insight?
I mean, I think that we are all pretty connected to some of our data that we all have. I really think that for a lot of folks that we deal with, any one of those wearables I think is useful. Most of the wearables today are tracking exercise and sleep. And I do think that sleep is one that a lot of the folks that I work with in early recovery, it's new for them to be looking at what sleep does and how it can reconfigure their brain if they're doing it well and how to do it well. So I think any of the wearables are good for someone who's new.
How do you keep the gym fresh for someone 5+ years sober who's plateaued?
I think that we probably see that in a lot of our folks, right? That sometimes we need to mix things up a little. And I think for someone in recovery in general, and we saw this actually recently with one of our members who I was able to pair up with someone who was new and coming into boot camp. And so it rejuvenated her a little. And so I think we have some ways that we can do that by pairing people up. And I think sometimes what that does too is it helps someone to see how far they've come, right? It's easy to get a little bit ho-hum about where we're at. But if you go back and help someone, which is the whole idea of what we do in recovery too, right? Help another person. But that can help someone to get sort of empowered and moving again, right? In a way that maybe they weren't before.
Yeah, that's awesome. What can family or friends do to encourage exercise without sounding preachy?
Well, I think this is the same again as what we would say in most of our folks that come into the gym, but lead by example, right? I think leading by example is always something that can be helpful to the other person. They're watching someone else feel good and get well, and sometimes watching that then leads them to saying, I want a little bit of that for myself.
It's great, leading by example. If you could change one thing about how treatment centers view fitness, what would it be?
Oh boy, just one thing. I think that we've spent so many years in treatment centers working on group therapy and all of these aspects that I think are really, really important. But we know so much more today about exercise, about good nutrition, about sleep. And I think that one of the things that treatment centers find hard is working on that and all of the things that we've traditionally said were the things we need to work on. But I do think we're slowly finding our way into this place where we know that someone can benefit from a yoga class in a treatment center and someone can benefit from exercise. I think we have a long way to go. So I wish that treatment centers had more connection to a gym, right? Like if we had a local treatment center that said, this is part of what we do. We send them to this gym or we do these activities in our own treatment center. I think we have a lot of room for improvement.
And that kind of goes hand in hand with the next question. Paint your dream future. Hospitals prescribing CrossFit or fitness classes, the way they do medications, what would that look like?
Whew, can you imagine? It's so exciting to think that we are moving in that direction, and we hear pieces of that from folks that come in who say, my provider asked me to start exercising, but I think that it's not very much at all, right? We want to see that so much more. We still in our society are fixing things with all the ways that we've known over the years and really not helping people understand that they could not only benefit from this, but maybe even avoid being on that medication in the future. So I think we have a long way to go again, but I think when it comes to substance use in general, my dream picture would be that it's really just part of the beginning prescription for someone is exercise and maybe making it far more accessible. And I think that's one of the things we're trying so hard to do here. When we think about what someone's life may have been like before coming into recovery, it might be very difficult to access exercise, right? And they may have lost their job. They may have lost their family. Like life's been turned upside down. They may not even be living in a home that is the home they were used to. So for me to say, get to the gym is just another added burden, not only cost wise, but time wise. And I think that we are doing some really exciting things here to make that more accessible for people, right? We have some programs that I'm part of at the hospital where we're able to scholarship people in and help them to get some exercise and get access to this community. And I think that that's my dream picture, is that we can help people in the beginning, especially to get connected into a community like this. I think we'll see a lot of benefits long haul.
That's great. Especially because in the beginning, you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
And so we could tell you that this is great for you, but till you dip your toe into it, and
right.
You don't know.
Yeah. I think about the person that we have that had watched people tire flipping and said, that'll never be me. And now she's here tire flipping,
Yep.
right? Like
They do the thing.
you don't know what you don't know. You think you can't be part of it and then figure out that you can be. And that's a credit to all of our coaches here, right? Who make this accessible for everyone.
It's awesome. Corey, you smashed this interview. There's a bunch of knowledge bombs through this, but do you have anything that you want to throw in before I wrap this up?
I don't think so, although I guess I do.
Yeah.
I guess I do. I'm really grateful to be part of a community that really sees what I do and sees that there's a place that we can make that connection for people. It's truly so wonderful that we are making this connection for people and filling that void.
It's great. Let's go.
Yeah, it's great.
All right, Unstoppable Challenge. If you're in recovery or supporting someone who is, schedule one deliberate workout this week. A walk, a class, anything that gets you moving. Notice the mood shift. Jot it down and keep the streak alive. Small sweat, huge step. And remember, every rep rewires resilience. You're unstoppable by design. If you're ready for a gym community that understands both barbells and sobriety, visit juggernaut-fitness.com and book a free get-to-know-you session with our coaching team, Corey included. Hit follow, drop a review if Corey's insights sparked hope, and turn notifications on. New episodes land every Tuesday, and next week I'm joined by Anna Terry for an energizing deep dive into active recovery, how low-intensity movement, mobility work, and smart rest accelerate gains and keep you training strong. Until then, be well, be unstoppable.
Now's the moment, it's your time. What you need, true indeed, unstoppable by design.